better day starts with a better breakfast at Subway. Choose what you love, from the better-for-you Western egg white muffin melt to the delicious double bacon and cheese omelet on toasty flatbread. Try it with juicy tomatoes and spicy jalapenos. Let Subway help you build your better breakfast today. Subway. Eat fresh. The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
this is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
It might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. Not a sunny day in Southern California yet again. I don't know what God's doing to us. The good news, we have a Pulitzer Prize winner on the line on the Subway Fresh Tech Hotline. Buzz Bissinger, what's happening?
Hey, how you doing, man? It's good to hear your voice and meet you, even if it's by the phone.
Thank you. I agree. What does a Pulitzer Prize look like?
Well, it doesn't look like much. They give you a little kind of diploma, like they give you when you graduate from college, and that's, pretty much it. When I won it with two other people. They gave you $1,000, and the paper split it three ways, so I got the extra penny, $333, and I guess 34 cents, or whatever it was.
So it doesn't look like a Wimbledon trophy. It doesn't look like the NBA trophy. It's just a diploma.
A diploma. It definitely does not look like any of those. It doesn't look like the Stanley Cup. It doesn't look like the bowling trophy I won when I was 10.
You won this, I think, what were you, in your early 30s at this point?
Yeah, I think I won it in 86 or 87, so I was in my mid-30s, yeah.
Okay. And what did you win it on? It was for the Philadelphia Inquirer.
It was the Philadelphia Inquirer for an investigative series with two other reporters on corruption in the Philadelphia courts, which, if you know the Philadelphia courts, is not too hard to find.
Right.
But it took us 2 years, and we started from scratch, and, we had to really fight through a lot of people who didn't want to talk, but we got some breaks, and it was a good series. It really was.
Do you feel like in 2010 newspapers are still doing series like that?
No. Obviously, they're doing less and less and less. I mean, what happens is the first thing that's always cut when a new owner comes in, is the investigative team. I must say that Inquirer, under a new editor, has done actually some very nice investigative work. But, Bill, you know what it's like. The Inquirer, I think, had 600 people in the newsroom. It's down to about 250. They have a new owner as a hedge fund. I'm sure they're going to cut it more. And it's happening all over the country. And as I say, the first thing that goes is the investigative unit, and then reporters are, they're not just covering one beat anymore. They're covering 3 or 4 or 5 different beats. And, it's tough for them, and it's ultimately really tough for the reader because they're just not getting the news that they need.
Most newspaper writers either go to the internet or start writing books. You went to the internet a little bit. You wrote books, obviously. You went back to newspapers recently and started writing a column again. What made you do that? Well,
I did it out of a couple of things. I'm a print guy. I mean, I started the newspapers. I wanted to be a newspaper reporter since the age of 10. I grew up in New York City. There were 7 newspapers at the time. It was fantastic. You go to any newsstand, and there they were, and you could buy all 7. And I came from a family of newspaper readers, and everyone had a favorite paper, even if it was the New York Post, which was actually pretty good then, or the New York Times or the Herald Tribune. And I was enthralled. I mean, the idea that every 24 hours there was this new product filled with new information, and that's what I wanted to do. I left to write books and other things and magazine stuff for Vanity Fair and even some screenwriting and TV writing. But in my heart and soul, I was a newspaper guy, and when this new editor came in, who I'd known when I had worked at the Inquirer, Bill Marimo, I sort of felt, I want to get back into this. I had a friend, Steve Lopez, who's a great columnist for the LA Times, who said, you're the only person I've ever met who has gone back into newspapers.
It's true.
Which is really true.
And it seems like you're doing all kinds of stuff right now because you also have a column in the New Republic. You do the Vanity Fair stuff. And you've become one of the most prolific Twitterers, I think, on the planet. What spurred the Twitter transformation?
Well, the Twitter transformation, I wrote a piece about it in the New Republic. I was actually drunk, and I came home one night, and, I looked at my email. There was nothing exciting. And then I looked at my Twitter account, and it had about 300 followers. And actually, you inspired it, because someone told me you have one. I don't know. How many followers do you have?
It's like 1.2 something.
Yeah, someone told me. I said, I got 300. Simmons has 1.2 million. What's wrong with this picture?
Yeah.
And, you fit the zeitgeist, and I love your work. And
you weren't tweeting, though.
No, I wasn't tweeting, and I realized you got to tweet. But frankly, what happened is LeBron had just played that fifth game against the Celtics, where we all know he had sucked. And some guy tweets, he says, well, as bad as he played, it wasn't anywhere near as bad as that book that he wrote with Buzz Bissinger.
Oh.
And, I read that, and granted, I was drunk, but I told him to go bleep himself. I just Twittered, and then I woke up the next morning, and I said, geez, I shouldn't do that. I'm a Pulitzer Prize winner, blah, 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 blah. I should have more dignity to that. But then someone gave me another shot, and I did the same thing, and I felt pretty good. And then I said, this is kind of fun to do. Can you really say anything in 140 characters or less? I'm generally angry, outspoken. There's something always up, bugging me up my butt. And just, started to do it. Sometimes, it comes from the heart. Sometimes it is over the top, and sometimes I have fun with it. But I actually really like it. I just like being able to vent, and I think part of it is, writing a book. You've done them. It's a slog, man. It takes a long time. You don't know how they're going to do. The book business is more bleeped up than ever. And, in Twitter, it's 140 characters, and I started doing it. And every kind of couple of days I go on these, Twitter rants. It's obviously shows that I'm bipolar. And, as I say, I have fun. I get good reactions, and I must say that, the Twitter community is a nice community. People think that I'm, full of they tell me. If they agree with me, they tell me. And it's, there isn't the kind of ruthlessness that you get on Deadspin, where, trust me, I've been,
right.
Buried into the ground on many occasions, although they've actually been a little bit nicer to me in the past couple of years.
You, I, by the way, encourage people listening to check out the New Republic column that you wrote about this, because I thought it was funny, especially the part where, and I think we could say this in the podcast, you created the phrase douche juice.
Right. Well,
how did you come to create that?
I have to confess, I think I said in the piece, I didn't create it, but I will definitely take credit for it.
Okay.
Some guy called me a douche juice, and I just started using it all.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. That's
all the
right.
time, and screw him. I'm bigger than he is, and everyone thought I invented it, and theft is the nicest form of flattery, so I'll take it.
Co-opt it. What the hell?
Yeah, exactly. What the hell do I care? If he doesn't like it, he can sue me.
I love it. I've been trying to work it into a column as an homage to you, very secret, quiet homage, and not flying with the ESPN editors. On the podcast, though, I think we could say it, though, but I do enjoy it. I hope you bought the URL douchejuice.com, which I can't even say.
Oh, that's actually a good idea.
Yeah, why not? It could be your new website.
I should do that. That'll be in my obit when I die. He coined the phrase douche juice.
It could add to your mystique. Right. Now, a couple days ago, the interesting thing, now I don't follow you on Twitter, but I have it bookmarked and I check it out. And the reason I don't follow you is because I never follow anybody who posts a lot, with one exception, Jason Whitlock, just because I want to be there when he finally posts the one tweet that will cause some sort of national scandal. Right. But the people that tweet a lot, I just bookmark and I'll check them out. And one of the things that's interesting about your account, other than the fact that you, as you said, snap off the handle from time to time and you get curmudgeonly and you do the whole thing, you're very honest about the whole writing process.
Right.
And just how you struggle with it and how you lose your confidence sometimes and stuff like that. And a couple days ago, you had a whole thing. You had this great idea for a book, and you said you couldn't even write a sentence for it because you were so racked with self-doubt. Explain.
Yeah, I've been. It's a very different type of book for me. I hate to call it a memoir because that sounds really stuffy, and my life isn't worth a memoir. But it's a book about my twin sons who were born 3 months premature in 1983. They were the youngest male twins ever to survive at Pennsylvania Hospital in Philadelphia.
Wow.
Jerry weighed 1 pound 14, and Zach weighed 1 pound 11 ounces. Jerry was the first one out by 3 minutes. And if I've learned nothing else in life, I've learned that 3 minutes can decide a lifetime. Jerry was in the hospital for a few months, but, came out unscathed, has a great life, graduated from college, grad school at Penn, as a full-time teacher, as a wonderful girlfriend, bought a house, everything you want for your child.
Yeah.
Zach had some trace brain damage at birth, and he's pretty significantly impaired, although he's very, very verbal, and he has mastered the transportation system. But he's not going to live independently. He's not going to drive a car. I don't know if he's ever going to kiss. I don't know if he's ever going to, fall in love. And so the book is told, from the perspective of a father dealing kind of with these inverted mirrors of one another, and it's framed around a cross-country trip with Zach that I took several years ago, in which, actually he surprised me in his awareness of things I never thought he was aware of. But it's tough. You don't want a kid like that. So many of these books is, they're little angels. They're not little angels. I mean, it's really, really hard. It's never what you imagine. It's not what you have in mind. We all have dreams of glory for our children, whether they come true or not. And I also fear for Zach. I mean, the idea of that he may have to live in a group home scares me to death. I mean, it just feels like, even if it's in his best interest, it's like, shunting your son off to prison. So, I mean, I think, the tools are there, the story is there, but it's been excruciatingly tough to write. And I'm really, really locked up on it, and so I took time off and did the, LeBron book basically for the money, because the money was good. And in trying to get back into it, it just has been really rough, because I sort of feel, I don't know if you feel this, I sometimes feel writers just have a finite number of words within them.
Yeah.
And then that's it. And that's it. And you don't, it's gone. And I think a lot of writers feel it was just sort of this serendipitous gift to begin with, and you get it, and you lose it. And there's some exceptions. I mean, Halberstam was David Halberstam, unbelievably prolific. I mean, he was the most confident guy I ever met. John Updike, I mean, that guy wrote everything. He wrote books, he wrote criticism, he wrote poems, he wrote nonfiction, he wrote fiction. I'm not like that, and you got to write with confidence. And when you lose it, I mean, you can get it back. But I'm in a moment right now where I don't have it, and it's scary. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Am I burnt out? Am I over the hill? Did the success of Friday Night Lights come early in my life because it's such an impossible act to follow? All these things course through your head, and they're all distractions. And frankly, I love Twitter, but that becomes a distraction. I Google my name about 85 times a day. That becomes a distraction, because you're frankly looking to do anything except staring at the page of the computer and saying, all right, you got to write 1,000 words a day. You just got to write it, because at least you have something on the page. But there have been a lot of days where I get up, I'm determined to do it, and, I'll be honest, I take to the bed. I do. Because it's tough. It really
Well,
is.
I don't think you're out of words, because you've written, especially you just posted a piece about the aftermath of Moneyball on the New Republic that I thought was excellent. So you're clearly not out of words. I would say, just listening to you talk about it, it sounds like this is just so deeply personal that you need to get to that place to tap into it, and maybe you're just not there yet.
Yeah, I think that's right. It is deeply personal, and I realize that, you want it. And so I think in a way I'm almost trying too hard. I mean, I wrote a first draft. It wasn't the whole thing, but I wrote about 8 chapters, and it was terrible. I mean, it was just very self-conscious. It was very, very forced. Rewrote it, and I think the tone is getting better. But, in a story like this, because it's about someone that's very dear and precious to you, but you also want to be honest. You want every word, to be perfect, and all of it is personal. How much do you reveal about him? How much do you reveal about yourself? I mean, I like doing different things, and this is a very, very different thing, from anything I've ever done. So
have you written a total first-person book like that, though?
No, never.
So that's probably the biggest holdup.
Right. I've never written a first-person book like this. It's all, my books have all been pretty much in magazines. It's been, pretty much straight journalism. I've written a few first-person pieces, magazine pieces, but that's different. I mean, that's very, very different.
What made you go to Texas? What made you leave the newspaper And what made you believe in the Friday Night Lights story that you thought, I'm going to move down here, I'm going to write a book, and this will be the best thing I could do in my career?
Well, I mean, I think like a lot of journalists, you reach a certain point, frankly, where you max out, where it becomes repetitive. I have been a journalist reporter for 15 years. I was at the Philadelphia Inquirer, which was then I think the best writer's newspaper in the country. But I was, feeling an edge to do something different, to try a book, and then, it's always a matter of, gee, that's great. Where do you get the idea? And it really came to me. I had been a Nieman Fellow at Harvard, a journalism fellowship, and I had some time off before I had to go back to work at the Inquirer. So I drove out west with a friend and took the southern route. So you go through all these southern states and small towns, basically. Whether it's Virginia, whether it's Georgia, whether it's Mississippi, whether it's Louisiana, and Alabama, and ultimately Texas. And you would drive through Main Street, which was obliterated then. The Walmart effect was in play already. The J.C. Penney's was gone, the Sears was gone. There was really nothing there. And then you drive a few blocks out, and there's this just glittering jewel of a high school stadium. And I'm not exaggerating. They were always, to me at least, they were beautiful. They were painted. They were cared for. In Texas they have droughts all the time. They'd still be watering them. I mean, the field was glistening and green, and it just spoke to me. And it really spoke to me in the sense these are shrines. These are places where, people in distant lands and tiny towns where there's nothing around, in isolated places, come together on a Friday night to have hope and heart and cheer on their boys. And then and went back to the Inquirer and couldn't get the idea out of my head, which is always the best sign for me.
Yeah.
What ideas you have, and then 2 weeks later you say, screw it, it's not a good idea. This one stuck. And then they said, all right, I got to pursue it and find the right place in the right town. And all roads really led to Texas. I considered Western PA for a little bit, Massillon, Ohio for a little bit, Valdosta, Georgia. But if you're going to do a book like this, you got to do it in Texas. And college recruiters who I called, they just said, you got to go to this place, Odessa. You just got to see it. And at that point, the school I wrote about, Permian, was the winningest team in Texas state history.
Yeah.
And I was looking for a team for the sake of the narrative that I thought would get into the playoffs. And they went down there in the spring of '88, and they said, yeah, we'll give you access. And I said, all right.
How long were you down there?
I lived there for a year.
So no family for a year? Or you
no,
visited
I went down with my family.
Oh.
Which made it better. I mean, we really lived there. My kids were then 5 years old, and they went down there, and my then fiance. So we really lived there. We really were a part of the community for a year, which I think is what you have to do, when you do a book like this. You just can't parachute in and out. And I wanted to be, with my kids.
You look at this book like 22 years later. I'm just talking about it from a dramatic standpoint only, not about life and all that stuff. Boobie Miles getting hurt. Better for the book or worse for the book?
No, much better for the book. I mean, much better for the book in that I think that what made that, it may have been the luck of the draw, and I'm the first to admit this. It may have been that I just picked the perfect season without knowing it. But when Boobie got hurt, there was an immediate tragedy to that, and tragedy I think is much more interesting for a book.
Yeah.
Than success. I don't know if that's the right word. And plus, the minute he got hurt is when the racism really began to rise to the fore. I mean, that's when you really saw it. Before he was hurt, he was, the great next star of Permian. He was going to lead him to the promised land. But the minute he got hurt, the daggers came out.
Yeah.
And then that's when I really saw, how precarious the lives of these kids were. Because once he got hurt, he was a nobody. He got replaced. He got replaced by a kid who was just as good, if not better. Although I will say, Boobie, and I never saw him really play, because he literally got hurt in the first play of a preseason scrimmage.
Yeah.
But I did see film of him, and he was unbelievable. I mean, he was big, tough, mean, aggressive. And, I still keep in touch with him. He's now in prison, actually.
Oh, no. For what?
I think it was like a domestic assault. He got probation, but he frankly said he called me and said, I just can't make it. I can't pay my bills. I can't get work. I'm going to go do the time. And it's, we're very close, and it's a tragedy. Look, he was never meant to be a rocket scientist or a physicist. I know that, but he wasn't a functional illiterate, and which is the way he was treated in high school. I mean, really was treated as a football animal with no skills except football. And
the only reason I asked about, and I agree with you, it was better for the book because tragedy, as you said, is better for a book. It would be interesting, though, had he not gotten hurt, had he become the big star, had he gone to college, had he gone to the NFL and, basically been, I don't know, Brian Westbrook or somebody of that comparable career, and then to read back about his high school. It's a different book. It's not as powerful, the tragedy element, but that would have been, I think, kind of a cool wrinkle.
Well, it would have been a cool wrinkle. I think it would. To me, it was better he got hurt because I think basically the innate attitude of the town really kind of came out.
It was the catalyst.
Right. Exactly. Listen, I would have loved for Booby to have made it. As you know, we could count on a million hands the number of great high school football players, basketball players who just never ever make it. And what was so wincing in a sense was, he was convinced he was going to make it. He was convinced he was going to go to the Jets, and so was his uncle.
There's no plan B.
No, there was absolutely no plan B, and no plan B was encouraged by the school. They didn't care.
We have a 30 for 30 coming up that I saw Rough Cut on that I twittered about. It's about Marcus Dupree.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And who, by all accounts, was the greatest high school running back of all time.
That's
and
right.
has a lot of the records and stuff. And the footage of him in high school is just, you can't even breathe. It's
Who did it? Who's doing it?
It's this guy named John Hawk, who also did the Louis Tiant documentary for us, who's very good. And
because I read the Willie Morris book, which was good.
And it delves into the whole recruiting saga with him, but same thing. Guy hurt his knee, never heard from him again.
Right.
What's weird is that they usually don't leave the town. Cody Webster was another one because we have a 30 for 30 about him, about the Little League team in '82 that beat Taiwan.
Sure.
And his life didn't really turn out that great, but he didn't leave the town either. Usually they don't ever get the idea to go.
Yeah, I think, certainly within Texas, and particularly in a place like Odessa, which is, way out there in the middle of nowhere in West Texas, there's a kind of an insecurity and inferiority complex, and they're afraid to leave. It's very, very hard. Even the Brian Chavez, who, the kid who goes to Harvard, he came back. I thought he would never come back.
Wow.
But he's back in Odessa. He took over his dad's law practice. But they all come back. Booby played a little semi-pro football in Virginia, and that didn't work. But, he went as far as Houston or Dallas. But he always kind of came back to Odessa. And when he was arrested, he was in Dallas. But it's just hard for these kids, and I think they feel a certain... I don't know what it is. I don't know if they feel a certain comfort, because a lot of them, they don't go to they hate going to the games. They just it's either too difficult emotionally or just dredges up all these things that they no longer want to deal with. The movie, Booby got celebrated, and Pete Berg, the director, did a nice job of including him, and he was in one of the scenes. I, in some ways, think it was just, it just perpetuated this idea in Booby that he really never had to do anything, that he was still a football star. So I don't think it really was good for him.
Were you surprised that the book did so well, or did you think all along this book's going to do well?
Every author thinks a book is going to do well, whether it's going to do well or not. I think that's what sustains us. I knew that I had been a journalist long enough to know, I knew that I had a great story. Frankly, Odessa was like covering a third world country. It was just very bizarre.
But at the time, sports books Season on the Brink sold well.
Right.
I don't even think Breaks of the Game did that well. Like, it wasn't an industry that sports books were cranking out dollar signs.
Right. No, that's right. No, I've become responsible for some of the worst season in the life books, known to man. It's become such a growth industry that my editor just told me that publishers no longer want them. They just don't feel it's the right structure. I thought it could do well, and I think the calculation that I didn't realize is that it became, even though it was about a high school in Texas named Permian, it became an experience that literally millions of people identified with. I don't know how many people said, I knew Mike Winchell. He played quarterback, or that was my experience, or I knew someone in high school just like Boobie Miles. And it didn't matter if it was Texas or New York or New Jersey or Washington State or Oregon or California. It was just one of those books that people identified with and could relate to, which is, I think, the key is to, why most books, do well. It's got to be some experience that somehow they can identify with. And this book, happened to be it. And it also had it was great dramatic structure that I had nothing to do with.
Right.
It had more twists and turns than, I said this, if I was writing fiction, I could not have made up half the things that happened.
Those in the season books, which I don't know who did the first one. I mean, I guess you could go back to Ball 4 and the Bronx season books like that. Halberstam was the first one that I felt like ingrained himself into a team and got to know everybody and really just, and I don't know if you could have that access anymore with a pro team, but then Season on the Brink, was it Season on the Brink or Season on the Brink? And then
Season on the Brink.
Yearbook in 88, and then my other favorite was The Last Shot by Darcy Fry, which I just loved, which was like 6 years after yours.
Right.
And I think they all work for the same reason. You don't know these kids going in, but by page 250, you feel like this is your team. And as you said, that it's been so played out now that it doesn't work for me anymore. It could be the best book ever about a high school team, and I just feel like I've been down that road.
Yeah, and I think that's the case. I think, frankly, look, I think one of the great problems in publishing is if someone's done something well, they have this feeling that people want to read about it again. You know what?
Right.
They don't. They don't. It's human nature. It's the same with movies, and same with television shows. Something works, and then there's 85 derivative shows, following it. Like, if anything made Friday Night Lights different, I think it was perhaps I really lived there for a year. I was part of that community, so when I wrote, I could write with a lot of authority, and it was more than just about football. There was a lot of sociology in there, about the town, about economics, about race.
Yeah.
About gender inferiority, and as you point out, it was a fresh genre. It's not. It's been played out, and it almost never works on the pro level.
So they don't get the access anymore. It's impossible.
Well, I even think in this case,
hockey would be the only league that I think could potentially you get even close to it.
And I even think, I even think now it'd be hard in high school in many ways. I think, it's such an American Idol society. The first thing kids would ask for, what am I going to get? What am I going to get paid? You'd spend half your time negotiating rights payments and all this other BS, and I think it would be very, very difficult.
It's so funny you mentioned that. Last night I was flipping channels, and on ESPNU they were showing some AAU showcase game. And, these AAU teams are playing basketball 360. Right. I don't think these kids ever do homework. But the kid in this game was Doc Rivers' son, Austin Rivers, who, going into his senior year, which is coming up in a couple months, he's the number 2 basketball recruit.
Right.
And he's on cruise control in this game. The fans are dead, and he's, it's clearly like just another day for him. He's on national TV, and I'm thinking like, really? You're treating this like you're a 27-year-old NBA star playing in Charlotte in front of 8,000, and I think these kids are cottage industries when they're 16 years old. Their whole life is mapped out. They got people handing stuff to them left and right. This is a perfect segue to the LeBron issue. Because, I don't, the thing with the decision and, oh my God, how could you do that and all that stuff. And I don't think people realize how these people are just catered to from 16, 17, 18 on, and so many enablers, and that's what leads to the decisions they make. Now, you wrote a book with LeBron. What kind of sense did you get?
Well, look, it was LeBron's book. It was in his voice. I'm not going to, was it the best thing I ever did? No. Was it the worst thing I ever did? Yes. I did do it because I did like the story, and it was simply, a story of LeBron and these 4 kids who became known as the Fab Five, and really how they became brothers.
But how much time did you spend with them?
Honestly, not that much. I interviewed him, 4 or 5 times, and probably saw him 3 or 4 other occasions. When I saw him, he was very nice. Down to earth, preoccupied. His effect is, very, very flat. to be honest, I don't think he really, and this maybe was my fault, I don't think he really understood what it really means to write a book.
Yep.
I mean, you just can't do, like 3 2-hour interviews. I mean, you got to be into it. Now, in this case, you're always fearful that's going to happen with celebrity athletes, celebrity anybody's. So I knew in this case I could rely on the 4 other kids and the coach and other people in the town to fill in the gaps. But he didn't strike me at all as kind of this self-aggrandizing, arrogant jerk that we saw during free agency. I think that one of the problems with LeBron is that he's slightly insecure in terms of, what he should do, what he should not do. He really is, is not that well educated. He never went to college. And so I think he's very reliant on others to make decisions for him. He's always very close to Maverick Carter. He's got his inner circle of people that he trusts. And I don't sense that he has sort of anyone outside who's older, who has the wisdom or the guts to say, you know what, LeBron, it's a bad decision.
I thought it was Uncle Wes, and for whatever reason, he got phased out a little bit.
Right.
I think in the 2 months leading up to
right.
it, and it seemed like in my opinion, it was almost all Maverick, and that's everybody who's dealt with the LeBron empire
right.
at this point in 2010 says Maverick is the guy that you deal with. I think Leon Rose is his agent, handles the player contract stuff, obviously, but I think Maverick's the guy. When you were doing the book,
I only dealt with Maverick.
Yeah, this was 18 months ago when you were doing this?
Yeah, I only dealt with Maverick.
Yeah, Maverick's the guy.
Maverick
right?
negotiated. It was. I think the idea emanated from Maverick, and it did emanate from LeBron. I'm pretty sure it emanated from Maverick, and Maverick was the guy, and Maverick was the guy I dealt with. And I will say, Maverick was, my dealings with him he was very professional. I didn't do a lot of financial dealings. That was done by the publisher. But Maverick was definitely the guy, and Maverick was also the guy who put together, I think, the documentary.
A very nice guy, nice firm handshake, yes. Makes eye contact with you. Does nothing about him that rubs you the wrong way when you hang out with him. I'm not sure that, as you point out, it is nice to have that older guy in there to the detector guy. You need the one detector guy.
Well, you do. You need the one detector guy, and no knock. Look, I think Maverick has the capability to be a great manager, but it's not like, Maverick didn't graduate from college either, and Maverick's not that experienced. I mean, Maverick lucked into an incredible situation. It was called, King James. Maverick hung around St. Vincent, St. Mary for, I think, 2 years, just sort of working his way into the inner circle. And it's clear that his judgment in this free agency thing leading up to the decision was terrible. I mean, it could not have been handled worse.
And they also did a very poor job of hiding what he was going to do.
Right.
Because, the Miami stuff started the last week of June, and you always hear stories. I had a friend of mine say that a friend of theirs who's a very, very wealthy person had Maverick call him like the week after the draft saying, hey, we're going to be moving to Miami. Can you hook me up with so-and-so? And he's like, wow, that's weird. He's just told me that LeBron's going to play for Miami. But everybody had 2 stories like that.
Right.
And everything was pointing toward Miami. And then when it got to the week and LeBron's renting the cabana the day after the decision and these athletes don't know how to cover their own tracks. So Us Weekly and these type of magazines, they can pick up all the signs like, oh, he's going to Miami. And it just seems so brazen. It's like, he's not actually going to do this, right? Like, he's not going to go on this show and sign with Miami, and that's going to be what happens. And then it happened.
Yeah, and, it happened, and it happened in such an absolutely, anticlimactic way. I mean, Jim Gray, do you still chew your nails? I mean, it's one of the greatest ridiculous lines in all of sports history. And then LeBron was his effect is flat. I mean, he's not, he's not an emotional guy.
No.
He's not. And he's definitely not the fiery leader type. Even in high school, it was that little Drew Joyce. I mean, it was that, he was 5'8" or 5'9", or even when he was 5'1", he was the one who got in your face.
Yeah, LeBron is
never LeBron.
He's very charismatic on the court.
Right.
And if you're in the stands and you're just watching the way he kind of stomps around, and he does have a charisma to him.
Yeah, sure he does.
Privately, does not really have the same charisma.
He doesn't.
Did you buy the whole theory about, the armchair psychologist? I think I even I ran an email in one of the mailbags I did about this, about LeBron had this high school team that you wrote about in the book, these 5 guys that were so tight, they're brothers, goes to Cleveland. I kind of thought he had that there, but obviously he didn't because of the way things ended those last few games and the fact that he didn't even mention his teammates in that 1-hour show. Do you think he wanted to go to Miami partly because he's trying to recreate that high school thing? Do you buy that theory?
I actually think there's some credence to it. I mean,
really?
I actually thought about it, independently. One weekend I was thinking about it, and it struck me that, he doesn't like to be alone. He likes to be with friends, and he did say in the book, the best experience I ever had playing basketball was in high school, and that the NBA is much more of a business. And I think he really likes being with, his homies and his buddies, and I just don't think that ever coalesced, in Cleveland. So I think there is, and Riley is sort of the father figure, kind of like Coach Drew was the father figure, or Keith Dambrot before that. So I think there is some credence to that. I also think that I'm sure psychology is one of the most worthless things ever invented, because why did he go there? Because he wants to win, and now he's with Wade and Bosch. And look, you know much more about basketball than I do, and there's still some holes, but that's a pretty formidable team. And, he wants to go where he thought he could win the most quickly. And I also feel if there's 2 seconds left and Dwayne takes that shot, I think that's okay with him.
That was going to be my next question.
I really do. I think that he's a great team player. He really is. And he wants to involve everyone, and I think he'll move. Look, if I was a coach, and I'm not, and I say once again, I'm not an NBA aficionado, but I would create a whole new position for that guy. I don't even know what you call it, because he can do so much. So, he can play a Magic-type role, but he can do more than Magic did.
Well, he does. The role is what Magic became in the late 80s when he had a little weight on him. They could play him in different positions. He was their lead scorer, but he was also their lead creator.
Right.
He could post up. He could run fast breaks. And, the only thing I'm talking myself into with this whole thing is that maybe LeBron knew all along that he was miscast as the Jordan-type guy, the guy who had to carry the offense and take every big shot. Maybe he just doesn't want to be that guy.
Well, I mean, Keith, I don't know if you ever talked to Keith Dambrot, who's a fantastic coach. Keith coached LeBron. Keith Dambrot is, I think, more responsible than any coach ever for molding LeBron into the type of player that he is. He coached LeBron the first 2 years of high school at St. Vincent, St. Mary, and he was the only coach who ever got into his face. And he did it because he said this kid had unlimited potential, and I didn't want to blow it. I mean, he just tore his game apart. LeBron, you're selfish. LeBron, you don't play defense. LeBron, your feet are slow. LeBron, where are your hands? I mean, just handed it to him every day. But what Keith said, because I called him a couple months ago, and he said he felt he was miscast, and that he should be in more of that Magic Johnson type role. That he's not a Jordan. I don't think he has that assassin's bullet, Bill. I just don't. I don't think he has that kind of assassin mentality that Jordan has, or Kobe. Give me the ball, man. I want the ball, and this is mine. The last 5 minutes are mine. Well, as you say, LeBron did that, but I never felt he looked that comfortable doing it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the worst thing that ever happened to him for creating misperceptions with us was the 2007 Detroit game, Game 5.
That's right.
When he scored the 29 out of 30,
That's right.
And he was the only guy scoring, and everybody's like, oh, he's the next Jordan. And if that game doesn't happen, maybe this whole Magic 2.0 thing makes more sense. And I think the more I'm thinking about it, and I still hate the fact, I'm old school. I would have loved to seen these guys be on different teams and want to beat each other and that whole thing. But
that's gone, man.
I know, it's gone. And you even see, I was watching that AAU game, and I'm thinking, there's no way to hate anybody who's a peer anymore unless the guy bangs your girlfriend.
Right.
It's really the only reason. Or you lose a ton of money to him in poker. But, yeah, I mean, other than that, you've been around these guys since you're 15 years old. Carmelo and LeBron James knew each other probably since they were 14 or 15.
That's actually, you know what? That's actually a great point, because they are together constantly. And it doesn't matter if they're the same school, because they're together all during the entire summer, and they become very, very tight. And that kind of, I think it's hurt the NBA, although the great thing next year is every team is going to want to beat these guys.
Yeah.
There's going to be a real motivation, and that's going to make it exciting. I mean, when they go on the road, it's going to be exciting. exciting, and if they lose, if they don't win the championship, it's gonna be incredible. But no, it's a buddy system now, and they all play together, from the ages of 13, 14 on, and maybe even younger, because, I think AAU now goes down to 1 or 2 years old. I mean, it's just insane.
You know who I blame? The Fab Five.
Dude?
They were the first ones that they got to know each other at these different camps and stuff, and they became friendly, and they were like, you know what, we should all play together.
Right.
And then it went great, and they became famous, and they started the baggy shorts trend, and they became America's team, and they made the title game and all that stuff, and
right.
They kind of set the tone, and everybody then was like, ooh, hey, we could do that. Hey, maybe I can be friends with these guys. It's okay. That was the first team or the first group of guys that I feel like kind of crossed that barrier. I liked the old days when people didn't talk to each other. And when people snarled at each other on the bus.
I liked it
stuff.
too. I mean, I don't go to a lot of games, but it bothers me, the camaraderie. I mean, it does. It's like they're laughing, giggling, high-fiving each other, and then, all right, we got to play the game. Let's go through the motions. Let's act like, we'll talk a little trash, this and that. And then after the game, it's all huggy bear stuff. And
your favorite sport is baseball.
Yeah.
Do you worry about baseball going into this next decade?
I mean, I actually don't. I mean, I think that the game from the point of view of, I think baseball has been smart in marketing and turning these stadiums really into family affairs. I think a lot of people go to these games now, they don't really care about watching it. They just like the atmosphere. And I think that will sustain it. So I don't really worry about it that much. I think the last few years have been healthy. I mean, the whole steroid thing to me, I mean, what do you expect? As I told someone, if I could take a pill that would make me John Grisham, give me 2 of them, for God's sakes. There was no enforcement. There was there were no rules about it in baseball, and you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, some of these guys, Jason Giambi, some of these guys, where would they be without steroids? And so it didn't upset me or, surprise me. What's interesting now is and this happens, it's cyclical, is how pitching has become dominant again.
Yeah.
I mean, really dominant with the no-hitters, but I forget. I mean, they're like 10 or 11 guys that may win 20 games this year, which has been unheard of. And there's some teams that are flagging, and there's some teams that you got to get rid of. I mean, Pittsburgh's got to leave, They got to leave. I don't know where they go. But there's always going to be this, despite Moneyball, which I found very problematic because I thought there was something, Michael Lewis he's a great writer. He's a great raconteur. He knows exactly how to pitch his thesis. But, there were 3 reasons the A's were good, and they were mentioned about 4 times in the book, and that was Zito, Mulder, and Hudson. Now Billy Beane did a good job of kind of filling it out. But, pitching's, it's not that like every player is equal. Pitching's 90% of the game. The Red Sox, some people say, well, they're a Moneyball team, and they've certainly done well. Theo's done well in, bringing people up from the minors and things like that. But when push comes to shove, they're going to spend $70 or $80 million on a pitcher. And that's what you need to do. So you still have that 2-tiered system. Money talks and BS walks. And it's no different than it was 10 years ago. And I don't know, frankly, how you're ever going to change that. The most interesting exception, and really the team that's the most remarkable, is the Minnesota Twins.
Yeah.
I mean, they've done it. I mean, Billy's record now, as you say, as you've said, he had a good idea, then everyone copied it. Ironically, he didn't follow a lot of the things that, their on-base percentage has always been lousy.
Well, hold on. To be fair, I said it in an email to you, which right. I was emailing you because I really liked that column you wrote, and I was saying, the worst thing Billy Beane ever did was not take the Boston job.
Well, I agree, and I don't know why he didn't. I mean, I don't know. It would have been interesting to see what he could do, at that level.
Because the stuff he was doing was so easily replicable.
Right.
And then to give a book and talk about it, and it's funny because my friend Darryl, who runs the Houston Rockets, and he was way ahead of his time with some of the basketball stuff he was doing, and he was like, the one thing I learned from Billy Beane is not to give any of the information we're doing to an author. Because all that does is tell everybody what I'm doing.
I mean, he did. And, then, of course, every team copied it. But, Look, I think the best general manager in baseball right now, and I'm biased because I know him, is, Walt Jocketty's done an incredible job.
Oh, you homer.
Well, he's a good GM. I am a homer, but he is.
Why do you hate the Michael Lewis book so much? It bothers you beyond the normal amount of bothering.
Because I just don't think it was honest. I mean, I think that yes, Billy did some he saw some inefficiencies in the marketplace and he picked up on them. But the reason the A's were good was the culmination, which happens, once in a lifetime of having three young pitchers all come up at the same time and all pitch brilliantly. And
the Giambi thing, I think, also helped until he left. But
that's right. Yeah. And if you take those three guys out, and that's accidental because you know how risky. You never know what's going to happen with pitchers. You have no idea. And he, barely mentioned them, and then all this BS about Jeremy Brown, this secret superstar catcher.
Yeah.
Who the diamond in the rough, who I think had 2 major league at bats, and it ends with him hitting a home run. I thought it was BS because I believe, look, stats matter, accountability matters, on base percentage matters, but I believe that heart, and I'm not trying to be, maudlin, heart matters. Some players care a lot more than others. And I think that makes a tremendous difference. And I think chemistry on a team can make a tremendous difference. But I saw it with the Cardinals. Some players really cared. Some players could have cared less. Some players, really studied video and wanted to get better. Some players said, screw it, I'm just going to coast on my talent. Some players, they go 2 for 2. They want to go 4 for 4. Some players get 2 hits in their first 2 at-bats. Hey, that's a good day. I'm not going to concentrate on the next 2 at-bats. It's too much work.
Right.
And I think those are all factors that go into the game. But the biggest objection was, it was like those 3 pitchers did not exist. Hattiesburg was nice, and some of the other guys, and Chad Bradford, but without the thing I give Billy being the greatest credit for was sticking the Cardinals with Mulder. That was brilliant. That was a
good one.
Oh,
so you're not going to see the Moneyball movie, I'm guessing.
No, although I'm wincing that it's coming out, but I guess Brad Pitt decided to do it, but it is coming out.
I can't believe that it's going to happen. It just seems like such an improbable movie.
I spoke to an agent who was involved in it. He just said, I don't know who's going to come watch this thing.
Yeah.
It's about how a general manager does his job, But look, Sorkin is a really good writer, and Brad Pitt's a really good actor, and look.
But at that point, if you get those 2 together, at that point they could do a 2-hour movie about like painters,
exactly.
Like just people who paint living room walls.
That's right, like exactly. I mean, it's going to be an interesting film, and all the BS aside, more power to Lewis. He's written some great books, and he's a terrific writer. That one really did stick. In my craw till my dying day.
Well, some people think that you went and you did the LaRussa book almost as kind of a response to Moneyball.
Honestly, that was not the case. I mean,
okay.
The LaRussa book was in play before I had even heard about Moneyball. I read Moneyball, while the LaRussa book came out. So it wasn't like, all right, Michael's on this book, I'm going to do that, the 3 Nights in August.
Okay.
It just happened that, people say, well, 3 Nights in August sort of represents the, traditionalist view, and Moneyball represents, the modern view. It's like print versus blogs. But, Tony's not adverse to using statistics. Duncan definitely is not.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of that stuff started way before Billy Beane. It started with Sandy Alderson when Tony was there. I mean, Sandy was doing a lot of that stuff.
What year was that you spent all the time with them? 2004?
2003.
2003.
And I got really lucky because in those books, and this was, 3 games in the Life books, it doesn't really matter how well they do that season. It really matters how they do the following season when the book comes out.
Right.
And they won the National League. They got swept by the Sox, but they had a great year.
But that was the height of the steroids era, basically.
Yeah, maybe.
It really was.
I think the height of the steroid era was when Tony was managing the Oakland A's in the 90s.
Well, that's an interesting question of how far this goes back. Because, and listen, I'm not saying he did it or he didn't do it, but I got some emails about when Andre Dawson became the Hall of Fame, like, why isn't this guy ever even questioned about with the whole steroid thing? He went from 20 homers to 49 in a contract year back to 23.
Right.
And then when you start thinking about it in that context, and we know for a fact that steroids were around in the 70s. The Olympians were using them. Football players were using them.
Right.
We can trace it all the way back to like 1963. We have established that baseball players will do anything for a competitive advantage, and they did greenies. They did all that stuff in the 70s. Jim Bouton wrote about it. So how do we know that the steroids thing didn't go all the way back to 1975?
Well, I mean, we don't know, and I think it probably did. I mean, particularly since there was no enforcement. I think it certainly went back to the 80s, and, I love Tony, but Canseco was obviously using them. And I remember Boswell wrote a column about it.
And everybody went crazy.
And, people went nuts. How,
you jerk, how do you, don't call out Canseco?
Really, they went crazy.
Yeah.
They were, indignant. I mean, the TV broadcasters over and over and over, this is shocking. How could you say that? Of course, he was right.
Well, same thing. 10 years later, the guy who noticed the, what was it, Andro?
Oh,
the bottle Andro in McGuire's locker. Everybody, he became a pariah. The guy was basically right out of town. Yeah.
Nice, he was doing his job, and he became a pariah, and the same BS. Tony's weak spot is McGuire. I mean, there's no question. He's stubborn about it, and he refuses to sort of, I think, still acknowledge it, and I don't think making him a batting coach was a good idea.
No.
I don't think the player, first of all, he wasn't really that nice as a player, from what I hear. He's a very distant guy. I don't think he relates to people that well, and I don't think the city of St. Louis really likes him that much.
It's been a weird thing with the guys that we idolize, and I know it's happened in Boston, which is where I notice it every day with Ortiz, and he was mad at the fans and the media, and I went to a game about 6 weeks ago, and it's just not the same in the stands. And this is a guy who won us the 2004 World Series and won us the 2007 World Series. He's the number one guy that was responsible, and it's just doesn't feel quite right.
Right.
And the fans, it's almost like, do we thank this guy? Like, with Ortiz, unlike A-Rod, he never came out and said, I did this.
Right.
He was in the Mitchell report. That's all we know. He had never been convicted. There's some peripheral evidence, but we don't know for sure either way. But it's definitely changed the way that the fans feel toward him. And I don't know. It's a dynamic that, as a baseball fan, I'm 40 years old, and I don't feel like I care quite as much as I did, and I don't know if it was because of the steroid thing.
You care as much about the game.
I don't. It's not life or death to me, and I don't know whether it's because we won. My team won twice in 4 years, or if because, like, for instance, A-Rod, the 600th homer, they're cutting into the 600th homer, and it's like, this guy cheated. He said he cheated.
Right.
I'm supposed to stop everything I'm doing because he might hit his 600th homer. How do we put that in context? I know that Hank Aaron hit 700 and what was it, 55?
Yeah.
And he hit them without doing anything. So I don't know. I just don't know how to feel about all this.
No, I understand what you're saying, and it's no sport. Since Friday Night Lights, frankly, no sports has become a matter of life and death to me. Just because I saw what happened to these kids. I mean, they really were used up. Now some of them went on and did very, very good things. So it wasn't the entire team, but there was no sadder sight than someone who had played as a senior coming back to the locker room the following year, after a win, and you just would see the look on his face. He was completely lost, and it was even worse among the old stars, the former stars. I mean, I would visit them. A lot of them really literally couldn't walk because they'd been so banged up, and they never went to the games, and they realized, too late, they had been used, and the game is, incredibly violent. So no sport really, for me, holds the kind of aura that it did. I mean, I find the NBA very tough to watch because I really get the feeling they don't really care until the last 2 minutes, if they care at all, during the regular season. I still do like baseball, but there are problems with it. There's no question. It's exactly what you're saying. I mean, whether A-Rod. It's interesting. I went to the Yankee game this week, and I didn't really think about it until you thought about it. Because of all the cheating and because of Barry Bonds and Sosa, McGuire, it's like, well, so what? He hit a 600th home run. They're all steroid aided. So, who cares? It's not a big epic moment. And these guys go from team to team to team to team to team, and there's no real, loyalty or allegiance. I'll be fascinated to see what Pull Host does.
Well, it'd be guess what? Hugh Hefner is 2 erections away from 2 million erections. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, but the last 500,000 were Viagra aided. Should we celebrate this? I don't know.
Oh, we should, but what does he count them? How does he know?
No, I was making it up. That'd be quite a stat. I think ESPN would break into that. Oh,
yeah,
Hugh's watching a movie. There's been some movement.
Right. Will would pop up from the grave and say, I got 2 million in one.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, Will probably top that. Yeah, I don't. It's going to be interesting. I think such a big thing with baseball were the records and the numbers and comparing these guys to different guys. And that was because it was the sport that had, basketball was around since 1946, and really nobody really mattered until Russell. Right. So it was a 50-year window. And in baseball, it goes back to, friggin' 1886 or whatever, and you're constantly, this is the most no-hitters since 1912. And the steroid era kind of, I don't know, it kind of shifted that into a weird place, and now I don't know what to make of anything. Jim Thome is the 10th all-time home run hitter right now. What do we make of that? I don't know.
Right. You're right, and I think steroids, and particularly since the home run record is the most sacred record in all of baseball.
But not anymore.
No, I agree. If Alex breaks it, it's like, fine. Doesn't mean anything. As far as I'm concerned, Hank Aaron will always have it.
Right. In
my mind, he will. He will always have it, and I'll never forget when he set the record. Hit that pitch off Al Downing.
There's 2 records that.
And actually, the DiMaggio record.
There's 3 records I think right now that that could really legitimately people would care about. DiMaggio. I think if anybody came close to hitting 400, I think that would be a huge deal, and people would get into it. And I think even though it's unrealistic, and I don't even know if anybody could start enough games, if somebody got near 30 wins. That'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah, that would be cool.
If Jimenez was like 27-2 with 2 starts left or 3 starts left.
Right.
I think that would be pretty cool. Other than that, I don't know. You look at some of these records, like Eric Gagne had 85 straight saves, and then his elbow exploded into 45,000 pieces because God knows what he was doing to his body, but his arm came off his body. But you look at a record like that, it's like nobody's going to break that.
Right.
Nobody's going to have 85 straight saves or whatever it was.
Right.
So I don't know.
And, to me, the ultimate reliever was Eckersley. Now, I don't think he was taking anything. So you're right. You don't know what these guys are doing, and then, I guess the turning point for me was obviously the home run stuff, and then Clemens. I think Clemens was definitely juicing. I think all the records that he set, or all the 20-win seasons he set, are basically BS.
Yeah.
And he's also, I think, just lying his balls off.
It's going to be a weird thing to explain. Like, I look at my son who's 2 years and 3/4. So it's going to be 3 in November. And, obviously he's going to become a baseball fan at some point because it's on all the time in our house. And it'd be weird to just explain to him what happened. Oh, yeah, these were all the best guys, and this guy was cheating, and this guy, and that record's not real, and this one. Like, how do you explain that to somebody who wasn't there for it?
Well, it's a good question, and it may pass. It's sort of going to be like the dead ball era, except this was the juiced ball era. Or, by the time your kid is 17 or 18, we forget very quickly in this country. And the one thing I'll say about McGwire, too, where I think he got shafted, is, look, the owners knew what was going on.
Yep.
And the owners used those guys because they were scared of that after the strike, and they felt the only way we're going to get fans back is with the home run.
I was at the 99 home run derby in Fenway with the combination of steroids and they were using golf balls for baseballs. And people were hitting balls over the Mass Pike. Over it. And we're all like, wow, these guys, this is amazing. How are these guys doing it?
Yeah, well,
never dawned on us. The big loser was Mike Lupica. Because he wrote that Summer '98 book glorifying that whole season. Do you want to, before we go, do you want to get curmudgeonly about anything, or do you want to save it for the next time?
No, I'm trying to think these trade rumor stories are ridiculous.
See, I would blame just the mentality that we have now with the internet where
that's right.
People are, we need a new word for it because it's not reporting. They have an obligation to pass along information as they get it. Right. And it's not information that would necessarily happen, whereas we, obviously you grew up and so did I, and so did a lot of people writing this with the newspaper was the paper of record. Every 24 hours they wrote something, and that was the report. And now it's every 24 seconds. And I don't think anybody has totally figured out how to adjust to that. And you saw it, most specifically with the LeBron thing. And I don't blame the ESPN guys because, especially with the LeBron thing, there's a pressure. Like, what do you have? Did you hear anything? What do you have? Oh, I'm here. I just talked to somebody who said he's thinking about Miami. Oh, well, go say that. So I don't know whether we have to reinvent how we pass along information or come up with a new word. What do you think?
Well, at the very least, it is not reporting. I mean, it used to be, and I guess I'm old-fashioned this way. You got a rumor, and you really try to check it out, and if you couldn't check it out, you didn't print it. Now it's all reporting of rumors, as you say. Someone says, well, I heard from a taxi driver he's going to go to Toronto. Put it in. And that's what seems to be happening, more and more. I mean, the reporting on LeBron from beginning to end, if you followed it at all, and I followed it, not closely, but followed it, was the worst.
Yeah.
It was the worst. I mean, every 10 minutes there was a new rumor, going here, going there, and then someone would refute it. It was ridiculous.
Well, what do you think of my wedding ring analogy for this? Because I feel like if somebody tells me they're getting married, I need to see the ring.
Yeah.
And if they don't have the ring, then I don't totally believe the wedding's going to happen. And if you tell me that something is done, then that is the equivalent of the ring to me. If something is done or if this is going to happen and you're telling me this, then now it has to happen. You can't tell me that something's going to happen and then tell me a few days later, oh, it was going to happen, but then somebody changed his mind and now I'm not sure it's going to happen. But you already told me it was going to happen.
Well, I agree. And so I think it becomes a feeding frenzy and it becomes a farce. And, that's why people have sources, This is the whole debate with bloggers. We don't want to go into the locker room and this and that. The reason you go to the locker room is not to get co-opted. You go there to make sources, to get to know people who are going to tell you things. And in LeBron, it was, any rumor that popped up was being reported and then basically was being, refuted, 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
So let's see the ring. Let's see, because, in the end, does it really, all we want to know is where he's going to go. And in his case, we only wanted to know it in 15 seconds, not in some absolutely ridiculous, excruciating hour. The worst hour of television, I don't know, since, I guess, the Soupy Sales Show was pretty good.
There have been worse hours of television. I think, here's my thing.
I'm trying to think what was worse.
Well, no, here's the thing. I think as the years pass, we're going to appreciate the unintentional comedy of that hour and Jim Gray and just having the Boys and Girls Club kids there and not ever interacting.
None of it worked. And it was totally self-aggrandizing. Even the Boys and Girls Club BS. And the great thing was when he makes that contribution, everyone had turned it off by that point, and no one cared, and it didn't co-opt anybody. No one. So that didn't work either. I think LeBron took a hit on this. It'll probably pass. But I think his aura was that he was a decent kid, basically, and that's gone now.
I disagree. I don't think he comes back. I mean, obviously, it's not. This isn't OJ or Tiger level, but I think when you look at where he was, and what he cost himself for what the benefit was, it's one of the dumbest things anybody's done in professional sports. Like, just listen. Just say you're going to Miami. Just release a statement. Then have a show a little bit later explaining why. People had no reason not to like LeBron James.
Right.
He was. I wouldn't say he was unassailable, but he had never really done anything wrong. He'd stayed out of trouble. He always handled himself with class for the most part.
Right.
There was no reason to jeopardize that. I think you look at what. Did you see that research stat that ESPN had that going in the day of the special, he had a 68% approval rating with ESPN viewers, and the next day it was down to 33%.
Is that right?
Yeah. Like Tiger Woods didn't do that much damage in an hour.
Well, I didn't realize it was that big a drop, but the only thing I wonder is, look, we got very short attention spans, and if he plays great next year, will people say, all is forgiven? But no, in the short term, he could not have handled it worse because his whole aura is exactly what you said. Here was one guy, a superstar who was nice.
Yeah.
Did not have a big head. Obviously he has ego. You have to have ego to win, but was not self-aggrandizing. Was not always out for himself. Was decent in post-game interviews. a good teammate, and that's what gave him the aura. Never got into trouble, and now he's as arrogant as any of them. And if he wins, it's going to be as much Dwayne Wade's trophy as it is his.
And that's going to be when it gets really interesting.
Right. See, I wish he went to the Bulls. I thought that could have been really exciting.
It would have been awesome. Or how about this? Just go to the Knicks and try to create your team there. You get all the credit if it happens.
Well, I agree. It was by far the worst. Of all the choices he made, it was by far the worst. Because, if you stayed with Cleveland, and I rarely agree with Charles Barkley on anything, but, if he stayed with Cleveland and he gets them a ring, that's a miracle. That's great. And that's, he's about loyalty. You go to New York. My God, if you can do something in New York when you have Dolan as the owner and a franchise that's been screwed up for how many years? 40? 35?
Yeah.
That's a miracle as well. But he didn't want to play in New York. He just didn't. I didn't think he wanted a pressure for 41 nights. And
he would have gotten it.
He would have gotten it. Look, how do you think the New York media would have reacted to that fifth game against the Celtics?
Listen, this is the part that everybody forgets with New York. Yeah, if it pays off and you do it, there's no better place to do it because it's the most fans and you're going to get the most credit. But all the other variables, and if it doesn't go well, or if you quit in a series like he basically did, or if you choke, or whatever, they're going to carve you apart. They have done that to every person who's ever played there. Right. And now my question is he even sophisticated enough about professional sports in general to know that? I don't know.
I think he was, and I also think he just felt, the one thing Maverick said to me before we stopped talking because of my tweets. He said, what's the criteria? I asked, where are you going to go? And he said, well, we're going to go where he has the best chance of winning. And I think he obviously feels, that's Miami. And I think he also feels, as we've discussed, he doesn't have to be the man. I don't think he wanted that anymore. I just don't.
Yeah.
I just don't.
I think you're right. And I think they did such a disservice for him with the roster they put together. And I thought actually the team last year was the best team he's played with. But, man, you just look at the front office mistakes they made from 03 to 07. Right. And that's when they did the most damage because if they had done it the way Oklahoma City has tried to build around Durant, which is very cautiously, let's put all these young players. We won't go for the gusto. Let's just try to put a good team of guys that he can hang out with, that he'll grow to become friends with. They had done that with LeBron. He would not have left. So I think for Cleveland for the crazy Cleveland owner. By the way, I think he surpassed you on the curmudgeon loose cannon rankings with that email, right?
It pretty much ranks up there with my performance on Costas Now on HBO.
Oh man, I was going to try to get through this whole interview. I wanted to be the first guy to do a long interview without bringing up Costas Now. That would have broken the record, right? We went for a full hour without it coming up.
I heard they wanted you on it, and you said there's absolutely no win in this situation.
I was supposed to be one of the three people.
That's what I heard.
And I said, absolutely not. I can't think of anything worse.
That's what Bob told me. He said there is no win in this whatsoever.
No.
So you know who they got? Me. Thanks a lot, Bill. Seriously, they got me. And ultimately,
it was a good thing, though.
Dopey and Grumpy and Will, who I'm actually not friendly with, just really rubbed me the wrong way. Yeah. Obviously.
You were described behind the scenes as a rabid dog waiting to just go nuts.
I was.
You got worked up.
I did get worked up, and I felt it. Now, obviously, it was articulated horrendously, and I am very embarrassed by it. And you know what? The more blogs I've seen, the more good blogs there are out there. But there are a lot of, as you know, terrible, gratuitous, silly-ass blogs. But they're also the future. Yeah. And, the problem with it, a lot of them just right off the top of their heads, and whatever information they have, they steal from newspapers. And, Deadspin, look, we've all been Deadspinned, and they can be really nasty and, really cruel. And I've been on the receiving end of it. And
where do you rank in the curmudgeon loose cannon rankings right now? Because Gilbert's definitely above you, but who else is there?
Well, I'm pretty high up there, unfortunately.
You're in the top five, I think.
I definitely think I'm in the top five. I don't know if Jason...
Whitlock, I think, is either neck and neck with you or slightly behind. I'm not sure.
Right. I mean, all I know is when I see Twitter reactions, and they say, if you want to see someone who's, old, bitter, crazy, but really funny in a really sad way, read Bissinger.
Oh, I've never found any of your stuff bitter. I think you're just passionate.
I am passionate.
You're opinionated, and you give it.
I don't think I should have called, Holiday Hackaday after he pitched the perfect game. I think that was a little over the top. But
what people don't understand about Twitter is that, not only is there no editor, but you could, be in the bathtub and type 140 characters and it goes up. And sometimes you're going to say something that maybe you wish you could have back.
And the reason I started Twittering, because I saw, maybe I wasn't following the right people. I saw what was being Twittered. I say, this is the most boring crap I've ever read.
It changed.
Let's rev it up, man. Let's get it going.
Twitter changed right around when I joined, actually, because I felt the same way you did. I was like, it seems like a place where Shaq tells people that he just had pizza.
Right, exactly.
And that was Twitter. And then it was like, well, why does it have to be that way? Like, I knew I had a book coming out. I loved the interaction with fans, and it was like, well, can I give people update on the book and, what's going on? And my off-the-cuff, like the Red Sox, somebody blows the lead in the ninth inning, I could Twitter about that. I could pass along links that I like. It just kind of made sense to me. And I think now that's where we're at with Twitter, is now people are using it to pass stuff along, to make little jokes. And it's fun to write 140-character jokes, I got to say.
It is. It's very challenging, and the links are great. And I like it much better than Facebook, which is all about, I had a grilled cheese for lunch, and it wasn't as good as the one I had in Dubuque, but it was almost as good.
Here are pictures of my kids at a bar mitzvah.
Right.
You wouldn't look at these if I was standing next to you handing them, but maybe look at them now.
That's true. There are a lot of bar mitzvah pictures up there.
I have one last question for you, and then I'll let you go, because
Sure.
you've been more than gracious with your time.
Sure.
When I was growing up, the takeout piece, especially in sports, Frank DeFord was the god among gods, and then Gary Smith. Then you had Inside Sports comes out.
That was a great magazine. Right.
You've done a bunch of them. This was the thing, the best American sports writing book every year. You read the best features and all that stuff. I've actually gone back and read some of the DeFord stuff.
Right.
And I think he is a Hall of Famer, possible Mount Rushmore candidate. But I read that stuff now, and I'm like, this is kind of overwritten and over the top, and I'm not really enjoying it that much. Do you feel like that era is over? Did we overrate it at the time? Like, is that a genre that's tapped out? Do you feel like it could be invigorated? Do you feel good about it? How do you feel?
I think it's a genre that can be reinvigorated, and I think it's a genre that still can work. Frank was a god to me when I was growing up, but when I reread some of the pieces, there's sort of this. They're a little bit too epic for me.
It was like the biggest thing. Right. And now, I don't know. I have a theory that the more you're exposed to writers that you like on TV, the less you're going to like them for some reason.
Right.
And on Real Sports, now he's become, when I read his stuff, I think of the Real Sports guy who's got his leg crossed and is yelling at Brian Gumbel, and it's tough for me to separate that.
Right.
But at the same time, it does feel kind of like it was a little too grandiose.
Yeah, a little too grandiose, a little, too epic, a little too, Harvard versus Yale at the Yale Bowl and all that other stuff.
Eggheady.
That stuff was happening then. But I think the takeout genre is a great genre. I think there's no replacement for a great long story if it's a great long story. I think newspapers make that mistake all the time. People will read a long story if
I agree.
It's compelling. It's got to be compelling. They won't read it if it's boring BS, or I guess I can't say that, but
I guess it's gotten a little formulaic for me.
It has gotten formulaic.
And when I notice Vanity Fair is my favorite magazine, and every month that I read, I'm like, there's going to be one piece in here that I'm going to love, and it might just be because it's so well reported,
right,
or I'm going to learn something for it or whatever. But it seems like, to me, the stuff that I tend to gravitate toward now is simplicity. Like, I love Gladwell's stuff in The New Yorker because he's not trying to make the greatest, most grand point ever. He's just like, hey, I looked at this and I spun it around and here's my take on it. I don't know if the grandiose style is going to really work anymore.
Yeah, I don't know either. I don't know either, and I think that what doesn't work and what I've gotten so sick and tired of is also the endless melodramatic style.
Yes.
And where I saw it at the worst was, and I have sympathy for these guys because they're running a deadline. Running a deadline is really hard, but the whole Brett Favre in the in the NFC Championship, coming back as the hero with the ankle and the blah, blah, blah. I mean, I just thought that was, frankly, ridiculous.
I would argue that Mickelson was worse.
Yeah.
Though, after Tiger's first major back, and this was for family values do matter and all that stuff. It's like, you could see those angles when as he was winning, you could, all right, here's the angle.
Right. Yeah, it's just too easy. I mean, it's just is too easy. And I hate that. And my editor calls it, autopilot writing. And there's too much autopilot writing. I mean, you reach a certain point as a writer, anyone can write anything. You just reach back for every easy cliche you have, and you can do it. But that's not good writing. Good writing is really shaking it up and making it different and trying to make it as creative as you can, whether you have, 5 years or 1 hour.
And you're still seeing stuff that you like that you feel fits that category.
I'm trying to think. I mean, yes and no. I have to admit that, I read the New Yorker. Mostly, though, I read books of all different types, and I read a lot of fiction.
I did too.
I read The Imperfectionist, which I really liked. Olive Kittredge, which I thought was amazing. I just read a book called Blood River, was mentioned in the New York Times about the Congo. I mean, I just love reading books. I love the New Yorker, but I work for Vanity Fair, and I think, not to blow the horn of the magazine, what makes Vanity Fair great is, you have the puff cover story that sort of glorified people, but that you have to do that because that's how you get newsstand sales. There was always one story that will knock your socks off.
Yes.
And that's because Graydon Carter is a great editor and still believes in those types of stories. How much longer is he going to believe in them? He's always going to believe in them. How much longer is Condé Nast going to believe in them? I don't know. Sports
Illustrated had a story that I really liked last week, and I was surprised. Cause it was one of those that it was about Bobby Cox, and it was written by a guy named Thomas Lake.
Sure.
And I don't care about Bobby Cox. I was going to skim it, but the way it was kind of laid out, I was like, you know what? I'm actually going to read this. I'm not going to do my usual thing where I just skim over every SI page.
Was it good? Because I liked the way it was laid out, but I didn't read it. I'll read it.
It was really good, and it was different, and it made me think like, all right, there's still new ways to do this genre. There's still new wrinkles and tricks that I guess I'm just tired of the whole Rajon Rondo sits in his kitchen and he reflects on the father that never got to see him be in the finals. And he knew as he held his father's hand during his last cancer gasp that he would play in the final. Enough.
And then he lifts a cigarette to his mouth and takes a long and healthy puff, right?
And then he smothered his father with a pillow. But he did it out of love because he loved him.
Right. Whenever a cigarette is mentioned in a story, what that really means is you got only 10 minutes with a celebrity. That's what it really means. When they write 8 graphs on how he smokes or she smokes, you're in trouble.
All right, Buzz Bissinger. Well,
it was fun, man.
You were well under the over-under that we set for bleeps. We thought it was going to be at least 25, and I think there was only going to be like 8 or 9. So congrats on that.
All right.
And please come back during the baseball playoffs.
All right, man. Love to.
All right, thank you.
A lot of fun, Bill.
All right.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Podcenter at ESPNRadio.com.
Peace out.
This concludes another episode of the BS Report. And we leave you with this final thought. Only Subway helps you build your better breakfast. Choose what you love, like the delicious double bacon and cheese omelet on toasty, tasty, foot-long flatbread. Make it your own with spicy jalapenos, banana peppers, and juicy tomatoes. And while you're here, grab lunch to go, too, on your choice of freshly baked bread, like the $5 foot-long BLT, and spice it up with fiery Chipotle Southwest sauce. Subway. Eat fresh.